What dark family secret were you let in on once you were old enough? 1. My uncle didn't die in a car accident. He killed his mistress and then killed himself by crashing his car with her body in the trunk. 2. My dad secretly had a vasectomy after I was born because my mom lied to him about taking birth control, which resulted in my birth. Our family is great at communication and conflict resolution, obviously. 3. My great-aunt's husband killed his first wife, then killed her, my great-aunt. They lived in Puerto Rico, and he fled to NYC so my great-uncles wouldn't kill him. However, they found out where he was, came here, killed him, and then went home. 4. My dad's first cousin is serial killer Kenneth McDuff. We saw the America's Most Wanted episode when it aired and were so surprised to hear about a McDuff, not knowing he was a relative. 5. Not exactly dark, but I found out my father wrote pornographic novels under a pen name to make ends meet when I was a baby. I've been trying to find one of his books ever since. 6. I always thought my 2 older brothers got addicted to drugs because of their own decisions and the people they hung out with. It turns out my dad had been feeding them pills since they were about 10 to keep them quiet. For years, I resented them for not being good older brothers, only to find out it was my father, whom I had praised all those years, who was truly at fault. 7. Why the neighbors moved? Trigger warning for violent crime. I was pretty young when this happened, so the details may not be perfect, but the story is otherwise true. I grew up in a coastal town and we had some neighbors whom I really liked. My parents were friends with them, and their kids were roughly my age. We played together all the time. One day, they very suddenly moved. I was confused because there had been no clue that they were leaving. I remember seeing police cars and moving vans a few weeks later, but that was it. My mother told me that the kid's grandmother had become very ill. The cops came to tell the family, and they left urgently to care for her and never came back. I was only about 5, so that explanation seemed legitimate. Many years later, as an adult and long since moved away from that area, my parents and I were reminiscing about our old home. I mentioned that I wondered whatever happened to that family. That's when my mom told me the truth. The parents had gone out on a date that night and left the kids with a 14-year-old babysitter. When they returned home, they found the sitter murdered. Someone had broken into the home, assaulted, and then killed the sitter. My mom said the police believed the sitter pretended to be the only one home to protect the kids. When the parents got home, they checked that the kids were safe and put them back to sleep. The police, obviously, came right away. Once the kids were sound asleep, the parents picked them up, put blankets over their heads, and asked the cops to be silent as they walked them out of the house. The family left without waking the kids. They gave the kids the same story my parents had told me, that grandma was sick and they were going to live with her. Grandma dutifully played along with the ruse for several weeks until the parents could find a new place to live. The kids were kept unaware of what had happened just feet away from them, as the parents didn't want them to be forever terrified. I'm not sure if the kids ever figured out the truth. 8. My biological mother used to give me heroin and Valium as a baby and toddler to control me, then drop me off at my grandmother's house when she couldn't afford to share her drugs. I'd go through withdrawals, but no one would know what was wrong. Needless to say, I was put up for adoption to get me away from that. 9. My uncle molested my mom. I don't understand how he is still welcome in the family. 10. Not super dark or secret, but when I had to do a project on my family tree in elementary school, one of the questions was, when did your family immigrate to America and why? For one of my great-grandfathers, my grandma told me life was very hard back in his country, and it was getting dangerous to stay there. For a long time, I thought, yeah, I can see that. It was probably hard for a teenager living in Poland with World War I around the corner. And I'm sure it was. But it turns out, it's even harder and more dangerous when you're a teenager who slept with a married woman and accidentally killed her husband when he confronted you. I can see why she didn't want me to include that in my elementary school project.